Hi, my name's Ellie. Thanks for joining me today. Let me ask you, have you ever felt that little flutter of a thought and then your thinking kicked in right after it? I know that doesn't make any sense, but you had a flutter. It was just a moment, like a little idea, and then it got overshadowed by something else. Well, what that could have been is it may have been the contrast between your intuition and then the emotional chatter that just creates noise in your head. Let me explain. So for example, you're about to embark on something, an action, a direction of travel. Maybe you're going to turn a corner or walk into a shop or decide to buy something or eat something or say something. And that split second moment says, oh, don't, and then you override it with a desire or another choice that's made logically or rationally. Well, that little voice, that might very well be your intuition. Because if you go back and trace what happened after you took that turn or walked into that shop or made that comment or ate that food or whatever it was, did it go bad? Did it somehow become the catalyst for something unwanted or perhaps undesirable? But somehow you'd managed to push it away and cover it up with your own decision based on your logic or your rationale. I know it happens to me, and I wonder if it's ever happened to you. Often these two responses that happen inside our mind are mistaken for being the same thing. We kind of think maybe it's indecision, maybe I will, maybe I won't, maybe I should, maybe I shouldn't, but they're actually two distinctly different things. There's one which is the intuition. That's the thought that actually guides us towards a universal truth. But the emotion-based mental chatter is what often, almost always gets in the way. And the whole point of that is to distract us away from that universal truth that we're being guided towards by our intuition. So intuition is very subtle. It doesn't shout at you and it doesn't argue with you at all. It's a little bit like a compass. It's just quietly sitting there and it's always pointing north, regardless of what's happening around you. It's steady and it's quiet and it doesn't need to be justified in any way. It doesn't actually care whether it's right or wrong in the societal context. It doesn't care whether people agree with it or not. It will always point north because north is always there in the same place. The other is the mental chatter that is very loud. It's the thing that crowds our mind and clouds our thinking. It's driven by our emotions, things like fear and desire and the memory of things that we've experienced, particularly pain in the past, and our conditioning, the way that we were raised, the processes that were imposed upon us, the things that we kind of get used to because they become routine. Now, our mental chatter, which is emotion-based, it tries to convince us of all kinds of things. It's a really good activist. And you might even feel like you're being pushed out in front by your mental chatter to kind of defend it. It feels a little bit fragile, as though it could crack at any moment, particularly if somebody disagrees with you. And that's one of the reasons why it gets so loud. It's very defensive, that emotional mental chatter. You know, somebody recently posted a comment asking me what the universal truth is that's described in Gnosticism. And I have been creating more and more dialogue about the Gnostics and their way of looking at things because it's such a simple, beautiful way to look at the world and about our reality. And yes, the Gnostics do talk about a universal truth that has nothing to do with the world that we live in that's distracting us from day to day. All of the routines and the news and the chatter and all the noise is very different to the real universal truth that is there to guide us all into our spiritual enlightenment. Well, I've been thinking about the best ways to be able to answer that question from that commenter. And I really do think that it has a lot to do with the difference between our personal truth, that personal truth that we hang on to, the thing that people often says identifies them as an individual. Well, The intuition that is universal, that is the exact opposite. That's the universal truth. And your universal truth may be your personal truth as well. But your personal truth is probably, more popular because it follows the trend. It follows the things that are considered to be acceptable by society. And it may follow the general sentiment of your tribe, which is whoever it is that you resonate with, that you align to, that you hang out with, and that you talk to freely. But intuition aligning with universal truth sometimes may not be popular. It may not even be interesting sometimes, but it is the quiet compass that is never going to waver. It's always going to point due north, always. Even when personal truth tries to muscle in, because intuition doesn't need to muscle in. It actually just is. So how do you tell the difference between intuition and emotion-based mental chatter when they happen to be competing with each other? There are clues out there. For example, intuition feels a lot calmer, even if the message is urgent, even if something is really urgent and important. When it comes to you as an intuition, it tends to be emotion-free. It's just a kind of a sense of knowing that this is the way it is. But it also has another characteristic, which means we have to sort of be careful not to misunderstand, and that is that it's very fleeting. Your intuition comes for a split moment. It arrives very suddenly and then it fades very quickly. It doesn't repeat itself either. It tends to be something that can very easily be overshadowed, particularly in this very distracting, noisy world that we live in, where people are constantly vying for our attention. That's why people who are often emotionally charged in their personalities might consider themselves to be overwhelmed with something like intuitive insight. But the fact is, chances are that overwhelming sensation is not intuition. It's probably mental chatter that is distracting the intuition, which is sitting deeper beneath all of that noise. Mental chatter tends to loop around in a circle. This is the kind of thing that's anxious, of course, emotional, and very reactive as well. It might keep you up at night worrying. You might think to yourself, I have this premonition, this intuitive sense of dread. But chances are it's an emotion-based sense of dread that's based on triggers and from the past, from hurts in the past, or some kind of stress, chronic or incidental stress, and it's an entirely different beast. It's a bit like a nagging worry, whereas intuition is not going to be a nag. Intuition is something that comes before you start thinking about it. If you are experiencing mental chatter, then, of the emotional kind, you might think that you're worrying about something that is very real. And yes, it might be real. It might occur just as you fear it would occur. But that is more likely to be a coincidence, because those things happen too. Coincidences do happen, and we sometimes take them as being signs of our intuition. And they happen every day. But it's important to know the difference. So here is a little hack to help to be able to figure it out. And I had to sort of think about this because I was thinking about how do I put my intuition into place? Because I'm often considered to be someone who can talk about very difficult, emotionally charged situations, but retaining the compassion that it takes to be able to see it from all sides, any side that I have access to anyway. And I think that has a lot to do with this sense of intuition rather than the emotional mental chatter. So think of something that you just knew, just before you had words to be able to describe it. Like, for example, here's one for me, and it happened years ago. I had a cat whose name was Cleo, and I had gotten her when I was really quite young. I think I was probably about 14 or something, and I brought her home on the back of a police motorbike because I took my bicycle down to the shopping centre and I had $5 in my purse, and there were kittens for sale at the pet store for $5. So guess who came home with a kitten? Except I didn't have any way to carry her home. And a police officer saw me struggling with this kitten in a cardboard box. And he was heading my way, so he put the kitten on the back of a motorbike, which must have been so noisy, and took her home. Anyway, I had this kitten until she grew. And then when she was, quite elderly, I moved to the United States. And she stayed with my parents. Well, one day, out of the blue, my father called me from Australia. And without even thinking, I answered the phone and I said, "Who died?" I didn't even realize I was saying it. And he responded and he said, "Cleo died." I just knew. And it was before I'd even had a chance for my brain to kick in. It's funny, but it's just like that. It's not as though it's a power. It's just a very natural sense. And when you live in the quiet and you hear it, you just hear it. And there it is. And it's available to everyone. It's the tone of intuition. It's not dramatic. It's just very clear, but you have to be in a space of quiet, of mental silence in order to hear it. So sometimes fear pretends to be intuition. That kind of, I just have a really bad feeling about X, Y, or Z. These are things that we say to ourselves when really what we're doing is we're projecting the past pain that we've felt about something that triggers this fear response in the present. Desire can do exactly the same thing as fear. If we want something really badly, we can sometimes mistake our longing for whatever it is for some form of guidance, as though it's supposed to be true because we want it so much. This is something that's playing out a lot with people people who are particularly worried about the state of the world. For example, and in particular, the United States, or the constant news cycle that seems to be getting sort of redder and redder, let's just say, in terms of rage red, not political red, rage red. And some people are playing out their fears and are getting them mixed up with their desires and with their intuition, and even making bold statements saying that they know that it can't get any worse, which means something's going to happen. And people have been saying it's going to happen before Christmas, because I think sometimes this fear or desire-based sort of mental chatter becomes contagious as well. You hear it so often that you think, well, it must be true. And yes, things might change between now and Christmas, but chances are they won't. They could change tomorrow, they could change next month, they could change in February or in 2026 or in 2027 or 2032. That's the way the world works, is things suddenly happen and change occurs. And so we might accidentally get it right by playing at our fear and our desire, but it's probably not because of intuition. It's because stuff eventually is going to happen. The truth is, everything is probably going to stay the same and continue in the same trajectory, regardless of what we think it is, until something natural, organic, divine perhaps takes place to change its direction. Because if it's change that's motivated by us, it tends to be transformative. And when it comes to the state of the world or the state of a nation, this is something that happens over the course of years and years and years. It doesn't just happen overnight. So if it does happen by Christmas, it probably would have been because of some kind of divine act, like a weather event, an accident, or even some kind of an act of war or something that is very precise and very sudden and very catastrophic. It's probably not going to have anything to do with the current cycle suddenly changing direction without anything monumental of that nature. But because we want it really badly and because we fear it very much, that still doesn't mean it's going to be true. Mental chatter is like the static that you hear on the radio frequency. But intuition is something much deeper. That's the signal that's happening beneath the static. And the only way to tune into that signal is to trust that the quietness inside you is going to reveal the truth, even if you wish that truth wasn't true. When I was doing tarot readings here, political tarot readings, I often saw how certain viewers would respond negatively to a reading that didn't provide good news. And I didn't like the bad news either, right? But in order to be a good tarot card reader, I needed to trust my intuition rather than rely on my emotions based on fear or desire for answers. And yes, that meant that my interpretations of the cards might not be perfect every day because I'm still human. But in as much as I was able to use any skill that I had to read the cards, and keeping in mind also that it's sometimes possible to misinterpret messages or misinterpret a sentence that someone says or a comment that someone says, because when you're dealing with language, you will misinterpret things. We're only human, or some of us are only human. I must always remember to clarify that. Being human means being imperfect. So of course I'd make mistakes. But for as long as I trusted the quiet intuition inside me, the cards always nailed it. And this is something that the audience always commented on. And that was that the cards always had it right. They always knew. The only thing that may have been a bit off was the person reading the cards, because I was the human. Even if the message wasn't popular, it always transpired to be true. And that's one key reason why I had to stop doing political tarot, because the messages I was getting were increasingly becoming unpopular. And I wasn't going to lie to anyone, but also it was an opportunity to go deeper and to provide content that was going to help heal rather than create a band-aid situation for a day until the next controversy broke out. So I wanted to help people to sense that quiet inside themselves by revealing hidden truths that are out there and seeing parallels across different genres and working with self-empowerment tools and things like that. Because the political tarot was giving me the answers that people didn't like. And that was causing more mental chatter, when what I was trying to do is I was trying to find the quiet universal truth. Once we learn to hear the signal beneath the chatter, then the desire and the fear becomes less relevant, because it's a form of inner peace that transcends anything that we can get from a news report or a daily weather report or a single comment or a single video. It's something that's transcendent and it lasts because it's universal. So when you're in the midst of a moment where you're unsure of what the truth is inside you, what that true message is, just pause. You'll notice that I often tell people just stop and pause for a moment and ask yourself a question. Is this voice calm or is it anxious? Am I working with fear? Am I working with desire for something? Or am I working with the universal truth? Is this message that I'm getting, is it trying to convince me of something? Or is it just calmly presenting itself so that it can inform me of something? If you consistently do that, then over time you're going to notice that the subtle tone shifts between intuition and emotional chatter. You'll begin to feel the difference. I've been practicing this for many, many years, and I did it primarily just with tarot. But then what happens is when tarot becomes part of your lifestyle and you're listening very carefully to the messages of the cards, it automatically transpires that you will generate exactly the same kind of manner of thinking and listening in other parts of your life as well. And so if you'd like to know more about things like tackling your fear or tackling triggers and things like that, I do have other videos that you can view, and I'll make sure that I leave one as a pinned comment in this video. I have practical methods of being able to gain true peace of mind rather than a daily fix of something that makes me feel better for the moment. I also have a variety of meditation videos which can help to train you to quieten the mind so that you can just allow your intuition to bloom. I'll include links for that in the description for today's show. Your intuition is always there. We always have it. It's just quieter than the noise. And that means it can be hard to discern and hard to pick up. But the more you listen, the clearer it gets. This week, try noticing that first quiet nudge that happens before your mind jumps in, before the words are created. Just that tiny little voice inside you. It will take practice, but it's really worth hearing. And the more you practice, the stronger that quiet voice will be. Welcome to the new world. This is Ellie Dreams and Under. I love knowing you're here, and I'll see you in my dreams.